gave much of the country a freezing cold Christmas. The bomb cyclone is blamed.
Tonight, the National Weather Service is warning that a historic winter storm is on.
25 basis point rate cut. The Federal Reserve lowering its benchmark interest.
But as I've said, we think we're well positioned to wait and see how the
New surveillance footage. It shows the moments leading up to and following a senseless random attack.
Let them go.
Within minutes of Zarutska sitting down on the train, the suspect sitting by.
What in the world is going on? The whole planet feels like it's shaking. And are you feeling it too? The breaking news out of America on December 11, 2025 hits us like one shock after another. Deadly blizzards tearing across the states. The Fed cutting interest rates even though inflation just won't quit. The immigration fight blowing up again after that murder in Charlotte. Trump taking another loss in court. The Northern Lights putting on a wild show in the sky. And a plane crashing right down onto cars on the interstate. Every single story feels like a piece of a crazy puzzle that's coming together to paint a picture of the last days. Do you see something bigger hiding behind all these numbers and pictures? Come with me and let's dig into each one so we can see the warnings and the messages the Lord has quietly tucked in there. So don't skip a thing, all right? Now let's get started with the first one. 1. Fierce winter storms slam the whole country. On December 11, 2025, America got hit hard by a monster winter storm that stretched across more than 40 states, from the East Coast clear to the West Coast. Heavy snow, flooding rain, and bone-chilling cold forced thousands of folks to get out of harm's way. Doesn't your heart beat a little faster when you see pictures of cars stuck for hours, roads turned pure white, and wind howling like it wants to rip everything apart? This isn't just regular weather. It feels like nature is sending one message after another, loud and non-stop. The National Weather Service says the polar vortex is shoving Arctic air down, while an atmospheric river pours in moisture from the Pacific Northwest. It's not only a weather challenge, it's a reminder of how fragile the balance of this old Earth really is. The biggest early season storm in 10 years makes you wonder, is this just random? Or is something bigger going on? When the snow piles up, Matthew 24, verse 7, pops into my head, and maybe yours too. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Could Mother Nature be pointing us toward the last days? It started early this week with 4 to 6 inches in Chicago, up to 9 inches in Iowa and South Dakota, and over 2 feet in parts of New York and Massachusetts. Whiteout conditions made it impossible to see your hand in front of your face. Hundreds of flights got canceled at JFK and Logan. Car wrecks shot way up in Kansas. At least 5 people didn't make it. Out west, record flooding around Snoqualmie Falls forced more than 9 million people to evacuate. Looking at numbers like that, don't you feel like time itself is speeding up and every minute counts? Right in the middle of all those cold, hard facts, Luke 21 verse 11 comes to mind like a quiet warning. There will be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and great signs from heaven. These roaring winds, blinding snow, and raging floods feel an awful lot like those great signs from heaven. Temperatures dropped to -22 in 17 states from the Midwest to the East Coast. Schools and offices shut down. Highways turned into parking lots. Supply chains came to a standstill, yet people kept fighting, hour after hour. On X, rescue videos are running 24/7 with millions of views. Folks crying for help, sharing pictures, telling how they made it through the night. In the middle of all that hardship, Job 37 verse 6 feels truer than ever. He says to the snow, "Fall on the earth," and to the rain shower, "Be a mighty downpour." Can you sense that mighty power at work in every gust and every drifting snowbank? Climate experts say it's just man-made climate change, that Noah can explain it all with charts and graphs. They tell us big storms have always happened and tying them to the Bible is just old-fashioned superstition. But when you see how strong and how often these things are hitting in 2025, can you really call it coincidence? One storm right after another, record cold followed by historic floods, does that leave much room for doubt? The numbers, the pictures, the rescue stories, they're not just news. They're pieces of a bigger picture about the last days. The snow, the floods, the wind, they're warnings from nature, but woven right through them are signs from God, reminding us He's watching, and His power is in every drop of rain and every flake of snow. Have you ever stopped in the middle of your busy day and asked yourself, am I paying attention? Am I ready for whatever's coming? Looking at the whole thing, this storm isn't only bad weather. It's a sign, a test for all of us. When you see those pictures of whiteout roads, howling wind, and water rushing everywhere, ask yourself, what's waiting up ahead? And am I awake to the signs the Lord is sending every single day? These storms are like the heartbeat of the earth, fast, strong, and full of power, reminding every one of us how short this life is and how eternity is right around the corner. 2. Fed makes a big rate cut, a little hope for regular folks, while inflation just won't quit. With America still trying to pick up the pieces after years of economic ups and downs, the Fed surprised everybody by cutting interest rates another 25 basis points, like a breath of fresh air in a room that's felt stuffy for way too long. In a year when most of us are used to watching prices go up at the grocery store and the gas pump doing its usual roller coaster routine, this news brought a tiny spark of hope, the kind you feel when you spot a streetlight on a dark road and know you're not completely lost. You know how it's been. The economy after the pandemic has given us 3 tough years in a row. Inflation that just won't come down, interest rates that kept climbing and squeezing millions of families, and 60% of households living paycheck to paycheck. The Fed has already cut rates 3 times in 2025, but every time Jerome Powell talks, he warns us that inflation still isn't tamed. Unemployment crept up to 4.4%. Doesn't sound like much, but it feels like the first knock on the door when you're worried about a recession. Then throw in wars and trouble overseas, pushing energy prices all over the place. No wonder folks let out a sigh of relief when they heard about this latest cut, even if it only lasts a minute. The federal funds rate is now down to 3.5%, 3.75%, a level that actually feels a little easier to live with for families buried under mortgage debt, credit cards, and student loans. If you've got a $50,000 mortgage, you might save around $100 a month now, enough to cover the electric bill or put a couple extra bags of groceries in the cart. Have you ever stood in the aisle trying to decide what you can actually afford to buy and what has to stay on the shelf? If you have, then you know exactly how big $100 can feel. On social media, number Fed rate cut blew up overnight. People posted everything from "finally I can breathe a little" to "this is just a Band-Aid." The arguments go back and forth like waves hitting the beach. Nobody's backing down, and nobody's completely wrong. Under all that noise, a verse from Revelation 6:6 floats by quietly. "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, but don't damage the oil and the wine." It's not shouted from the rooftops. It just shows up like an old picture you forgot you had, reminding us that high prices and hard times of scarcity have been around forever. But the markets didn't exactly throw a party. Stocks stayed pretty calm, yet the clouds of unemployment and rising prices are still hanging over everybody's head. Food and energy keep getting more expensive, so even with a little relief on interest, some families still can't keep up with everyday bills. When you see long lines at the food banks, it's hard not to think that all those big macro numbers don't mean much at the kitchen table. That makes Matthew 24:7 hit close to home. There will be famines in various places, not as some scary judgment, just a mirror showing what's going on right now. Of course, the skeptics have a point too. They say it's just the normal economic cycle. Boom, bust, tighten, loosen. We've been through worse recessions and the world kept turning. No need to read anything supernatural into it. Fair enough. But is that the whole picture? When inflation stays high longer than anyone thought, when trouble pops up in so many places at once, when every model gets proved wrong over and over, is it really all just coincidence? Some things look random. until they don't anymore. In times like these, a line from Luke 21:11 slips in like a quiet footnote. There will be food shortages in many lands. Not to scare anybody, just to say, maybe we ought to look past the charts and numbers sometimes. You've probably felt it yourself, that uneasy sense that the world is changing faster than we expected. When you step back, this Fed rate cut isn't only about money. It's a gentle but sharp reminder that we've put way too much trust in stuff, in numbers, in systems we thought could never fail. But any economic setup, no matter how strong it looks, can shake with one little push. And every shake like this points to the bigger picture, the one that's been talked about for a long, long time. If you look close, the story isn't really about interest rates. It's about how fragile we are, how limited our systems are, and the quiet call to turn back to faith before the next round of shaking starts. This rate cut feels like one last soft warning. Get ready, because bigger changes are still coming. 3. Immigration debate explodes after Good Samaritan murder on Charlotte train. On December 5th, 2025, Charlotte didn't just see a killing on the subway. It saw a new line get crossed in the long, slow-burning fight over immigration, borders, and whether regular Americans are still safe. The death of 24-year-old Kenyon Doby, a guy who simply stepped in to stop what looked like a small argument, turned into something much bigger real fast. It became a picture of an America that stretched tight, pulled in different directions by waves of migrants bigger than anything we've ever seen, and by questions about right and wrong nobody can dodge anymore. When that video of Doby going down inside the cold blue train car hit the internet, it wasn't just one man's tragedy. It put a face on the uneasy feeling the whole country has been trying to keep quiet about for way too long. This happened right when the country is going through the biggest surge of people crossing the southern border in modern history. Homeland Security says millions have come across just in 2025, a number big enough to change how everybody feels about safety, control, and what this country is even going to look like down the road. In the middle of all that, the suspect, Oscar Solorzano from Honduras, a man already deported twice and banned from the trains for carrying a knife, stopped being just one bad guy. He became the match that lit the whole immigration argument on fire, from one end of the country to the other. Moments like this force a country to look in the mirror, whether folks like what they see or not. When the video of Solorzano stabbing Doby over and over spread like wildfire, more than 3 million views in under 24 hours, people's feelings spilled way past Charlotte. Elon Musk shared it. Crypto folks quickly made a hero meme coin to raise money for the victim's family and pulled in $665,000 overnight. That's how the internet works these days. Fast, messy, but full of energy. Anybody who watches that and still thinks we haven't reached a dangerous point probably hasn't seen the crowds in Texas and Minnesota holding signs about a wide-open border. Different places, different voices, but they're all asking the same quiet question nobody wants to say out loud. Is America losing the ability to protect itself? In the middle of all the noise, an old Bible verse started hitting harder. 2 Timothy 3:1 says, "In the last days, there will be very difficult times, and the hard times here aren't just money or politics alone. They're the kind where violence starts feeling normal." Plenty of folks who watched that video said they weren't even shocked anymore, just kind of used to it. And that's the scary part. When cruelty becomes everyday stuff, isn't that exactly what Jesus meant in Matthew 24:12 when he talked about wickedness increasing and love growing cold? Doby, still fighting for his life right now and needing every prayer he can get, stands for the opposite. He stepped in to protect somebody, a real-life Good Samaritan. Some people scroll past the story and feel a little sad, then move on. But anybody who stops and thinks a little longer realizes, when good people have to pay with their lives just for doing the right thing, that's not only a tragedy, it's a sign our whole sense of right and wrong is cracking. It feels heavy, like somebody's slowly turning a mirror toward the country so we can't look away. Of course, there's the other side saying this is just poverty, bad policy, inequality, that immigration isn't some end times thing, and that immigrants help the economy more than they hurt it. But with violent incidents piling up all through 2025, from Charlotte to Minneapolis, it gets harder to brush off the connection to those old warnings in Scripture. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need anybody to shout it. It just lines the events up in front of us and speaks for itself. And deep in the Jewish Christian tradition, Jeremiah 22:3 tells us to treat the foreigner fairly, but it also warns what happens when laws are ignored and order breaks down. Looking at this story, you can see it as just another crime, or you can see it as one more piece in a much bigger picture, a picture of a nation moving faster and faster toward the signs of the last days, not to scare anybody, but to call people back to what's right. If anything echoes from Dobie's tragedy, it's a quiet, clear reminder that moral decline never happens all at once. It builds, one awful event after another, until we finally have to face it. And when we step back and look at the whole thing, record numbers crossing the border, violence on the rise, communities torn apart, we can't help feeling what many generations before us warned about. This is a wake-up moment, not to panic, but to turn back, because sometimes the most painful upheavals are the last loud call to come back to the light. 4. Trump's legal setback. Court blocks National Guard deployment and Texas election map fight. The 11th of December 2025 started off like one of those split-screen news days. On one side, Republicans scored a big win when the Supreme Court gave the green light to Texas's new election map. On the other, President Trump took a surprise hit when a federal judge slammed the brakes on sending National Guard troops into Los Angeles, a direct slap at the heart of his executive power. Two rulings, just hours apart, pulling America in opposite directions at the same time. For a lot of folks, this isn't just about one state or one court case anymore. It feels like the whole country is holding its breath and letting it out all at once. With the nation already torn up after the 2024 election, every move from Washington hits a raw nerve. The Trump administration, already catching heat for militarizing things at home, now has another stack of lawsuits from blue states. When Judge Charles Breyer issued his order, telling nearly 300 National Guard troops to stand down in LA, and handing control straight back to California, you could almost hear the next chapter of the federal versus state power struggle click into place. Quiet, but ice cold. The Texas map tells a whole different story. Adding 5 districts tilted toward the GOP gives Republicans a solid launching pad for the 2026 midterms. But the second that ruling dropped, X, lit up like a battlefield. Governors like Gavin Newsom started firing off tweets calling it blatant power grabbing, and suddenly everybody's arguing again about where democracy ends and raw power begins. Those posts got mixed in with talk about that unsolved pipe bomb case and the freshly unsealed Epstein files, and the whole 2025 political air just smells like distrust. In the middle of all these mixed signals, you can almost feel the country vibrating. Nothing sits still for 5 seconds. Every decision, every statement bounces 10 times louder than normal. Sometimes when you're scrolling through the latest headlines, it's a weird feeling, like if you blink, the whole story might flip the other way. If you've ever had that quiet thought, something bigger is moving under all this, you're definitely not the only one. In times like these, certain Bible verses start jumping off the page in ways that are hard to explain. Matthew 24:10 says, "Many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other." You don't have to look far to see that playing out in the shouting matches online, in the tug-of-war between states, in families who won't even talk politics at Thanksgiving anymore. Those cracks feel like they're spreading faster every day. Then Luke 21:25 talks about nations being in anguish and perplexity. And it's tough to ignore that picture when the country keeps getting hit with disasters, violence, and now power struggles inside its own government. And Romans 13:1 says, Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. That verse doesn't get quoted much these days, but it carries real weight when Trump runs into a legal wall like this. For folks who take the Bible seriously, this isn't just politics. It's a reminder that power cut loose from God's direction hits a limit pretty quick. Some people read the news and move on. Others stop a little longer and wonder if this is heaven's gentle way of saying nobody gets to outrun his plan. Of course, plenty of folks push right back and say, look, this is just democracy doing its job. Courts checking the White House, states guarding their turf. No end-time stuff, no signs, just the Constitution working. They're not wrong. But that view still doesn't explain why everything in 2025 feels like it's echoing together, shaking people's trust harder than usual. When political division gets so bad, you don't even recognize our neighbors online anymore. Talking about last days signs doesn't sound crazy anymore. Bottom line, America in 2025 isn't just wrestling with politics. It's wrestling with a full-blown crisis of faith in pretty much everything. People are asking, what's actually holding us together? What's keeping us from sliding all the way into hate and chaos? Maybe that's why, right now, the Bible doesn't feel like an old book gathering dust. It feels like a roadmap saying the chaos isn't random. It's a wake-up call to come back to humility and love. In the end, Trump's courtroom loss isn't just another political headline. It's a reminder that power struggles never stay inside courtrooms or Congress. They always start in the human heart. And if those old prophecies are right, this isn't the moment to pick a side. It's the moment to pick the light. 5. Amazing northern lights spread across Northern America. On the evening of December 11th, 2025, the sky over Northern America suddenly lit up with colors you don't see every day. Long ribbons of pink, green, and purple dancing and twisting like living silk, stretching all the way from Alaska down to Minnesota and Michigan. Nobody thought the aurora would ever come that far south, and nobody expected it to grab the attention of millions of people in one single night. But it happened, and it wasn't just pretty. It felt like a gentle reminder from way up above, as if the sky decided to speak up right in the middle of the most confusing, divided time this country has seen in years. The scientists explained it plain and simple. The sun goes through an 11-year cycle, and 2025 is the peak. That caused a G4 geomagnetic storm, something that hardly ever happened in the last cycle. NASA folks had been expecting it for a while, but no one guessed it would put on a show this spectacular. The lights started around 4 in the afternoon and kept going until 1 in the morning. A lot of us felt like we were inside some beautiful movie, where the line between real life and something heavenly got real blurry. This year's aurora wasn't like the old ones. It wasn't just soft green waves in a dark sky. This time there were bright pink streaks that looked like fireworks, and glowing emerald greens that looked almost liquid, swirling together in huge spirals. Places like Iowa and Wisconsin, where you almost never see the northern lights, had thousands of folks pulling off highways, standing in fields and parking lots, staring up like they didn't want to miss a second of it. Videos on X spread like wildfire. Some got tens of millions of views overnight. Hotels in Minnesota were completely booked within 2 hours. A regular old sky event turned into the hottest ticket in town. If you've ever looked up at a starry night and suddenly felt tiny in the best kind of way, this aurora made that feeling 10 times stronger. You didn't have to believe in signs or prophecies. Just watching those lights tear through the darkness was enough to make something stir inside you that's hard to put into words. And if you caught yourself pausing a little longer on one of those short phone videos, you probably felt that strange energy too, like the sky cracked open for a minute and let us peek at something bigger than this world. But behind all that beauty was some serious business. GPS went haywire for hours across Alaska and parts of Canada, messing with airplanes and ships. NOAA had to put out warnings about bad navigation, and some flights got rerouted fast. A few experts said if the storm had been just 1 level stronger, It could have knocked out power grids. So while the sky looked like a painting, things down here on the ground got a little shaky, like nature was sending a quiet but clear message to pay attention. That's when Bible verses started popping up all over social media. Luke 21:25 says it plain. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity. It's hard not to think about that when the biggest northern lights in decades show up the very year the sun is angriest, right when America feels more torn apart than ever. Seeing those lights and then reading those words, well, it makes you wonder if this is just physics or something written a long time ago coming true. Matthew 24:29 says, "The sun will be darkened, the moon won't give light, and the stars will fall from the sky." The aurora isn't darkness, but it's a direct result of an unusually wild sun, real commotion in the heavens. When colors nobody's ever seen before cut across the American sky, those old verses stop feeling like poetry and start looking like something millions of us are recording on our phones. Then there's Ezekiel 1:4. "I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light." That description gives you chills when you see the lights rolling down from the North Pole all the way to Minnesota, a moving, flickering curtain that really does look like a living cloud of fire. Of course, plenty of folks say, hold on, it's just science. The sun's at its peak, the storm was strong, the lights went farther south. No miracles, no end times. They're not wrong about the science. But what gets people thinking is the timing. 2025 brings the strongest aurora in decades, right when political chaos, climate trouble, and everything else seem to be hitting all at once, just like those old prophecies describe the last days. That's why this one feels different. It's not just lights in the sky. It's lighting up questions most of us try not think about. Is something trying to get our attention? Is God using the heavens themselves to wake us up? Believe it or not, it's hard to deny that the 2025 Northern Lights feel like a milestone, a reminder that some things are moving way beyond what we can figure out. And for those who see the world through the Bible, this isn't just pretty, it's a call from above, asking us to wake up before the night finally closes in. 6. Small plane makes emergency landing on top of a car on I-95 inches, Brevard County, Florida. There are moments that make the whole country hold its breath, not because somebody died, but because the line between life and death can be as thin as a piece of metal falling out of the sky. That's exactly what happened in Brevard County, Florida on December 8, 2025. A little plane came straight down onto the interstate, landed right on top of a moving car, and somehow nobody got killed. Stories like that make you stop for a second, take a deep breath, and wonder, is anything in this life really just random? The thing blew up all over social media like a wave, hitting everybody's phone at once. Dashcam videos, shocked comments, it all added up to the same feeling. Something bigger is going on around us. If you've ever gotten chills watching something that doesn't seem possible, you know how folks felt watching it. Not scared, just stunned and quietly thankful. Every once in a while, we need a jolt like that to remember how small we really are. It happened at 5:45 in the evening, rush hour, southbound I-95 right around Cocoa. The twin-engine plane lost power while it was flying low. Instead of trying to make it to the nearest airport, the 27-year-old pilot decided to put it down on the highway, a choice where a couple seconds either way could have turned into a nightmare. The plane hit a 2023 Toyota Camry driven by a 57-year-old lady. The amazing part? No explosion, no fire, just the screech of metal, a flash of light when it touched down, and then this weird silence that left every witness frozen. Traffic was shut down for over 2 hours. Florida Highway Patrol closed all the lanes. NTSB and FAA jumped right on the investigation. Funny thing, this was the second emergency landing in that area in just a few weeks, enough to get folks in Florida talking. With strange winter storms, bad weather, and worries, and older planes needing more maintenance, experts are saying these incidents aren't rare anymore. When Elon Musk posted on X, "Miracle no fatalities. Aviation tech needs upgrade," people shared the video even more, and it became the biggest story of the day. But there's a deeper feeling a lot of us can't shake: how fragile life is, and how many strange things have been piling up in 2025. When a plane drops out of the sky right in the middle of rush hour traffic, it's not just a mechanical failure anymore, it shakes everybody up. The Bible talked about times like this in Matthew 24, verses 6 and 7, saying we'd hear of wars and rumors of wars and trouble in many places, signs that harder days are coming. Those words are thousands of years old, but put them next to all the storms, accidents, and trouble we're seeing now, and it sure feels like the picture is getting clear. That uneasy feeling shows up again in Luke 21, 25 and 26, talking about nations being perplexed and people's hearts failing them for fear because of things coming on the earth. Nobody driving on I-95 that evening thought they were about to see something straight out of a movie. But that's what throws us off. We really don't control much except the moment we're in. And in that moment, the lady in the Camry walked away alive. Not because of technology, but because of what a lot of folks simply call a miracle. Every miracle carries a message. Psalm 91, verse 11 says, "For he shall give his angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways." For many who watched that video, those words rang loud and clear. Sometimes we're flat out helpless, yet still protected in a way that's hard to explain. Of course, some folks say it was just luck and a good pilot. They point to FAA numbers, over 1,200 emergency landings a year, and Florida has tons of private planes. That's true. But it doesn't explain why so many odd things are happening all at once, right when storms and strange lights in the sky and everything else are at a peak. Sometimes it's not about one event. It's the whole picture coming together. Put this crash together with the weird snowstorms, northern lights seen clear down in Iowa, political mess, and dangerous attacks we've seen just this week, and the pieces start fitting like a puzzle. The plane on I-95 isn't just a wow news story. It's a loud reminder that we're walking into a time when everything feels more fragile, and we need to stay awake like never before. It might scare you to think about it, but sometimes a little fear is exactly what makes us turn back to the right place for shelter. And that day in Florida, where nobody died in something that should have been a tragedy, feels like a quiet voice from heaven saying, "Wake up, come to me. Life is too thin to go it alone." And there you have it. 6 big stories from America yesterday, every one of them lining up with the warnings and prophecies the Lord gave us thousands of years ago. Do you see it now? Nothing feels random anymore. It's like everything is following some unseen picture that's finally coming into focus. Looking back at everything that's happened, we can't just keep living like all these signs are random coincidences. This is the moment each of us needs to stop, wake up, and ask ourselves, what is calling me back home? Let's repent, pray, and put our full trust in the Lord, because only in Him will we find true peace in this crazy, shaken-up world. If any of this is stirring something in your heart, even just a little, I'd love for you to leave a prayer or a thought down in the comments. It's not just sharing, it's how we hold each other up and spread His love in these important days. And if this spoke to you, please hit like, share it with someone, and subscribe so we can keep walking this road together, watching for the signs of the times. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. May God's peace and protection be with you and your family always.
Debris continued to overwhelm emergency workers and the survivors there.
Live on GMA as millions across the country face a flash flooding threat. We're showing you what...
In the last few years, It's like the Earth has grabbed humanity by the collar and started shaking hard. Climate changes that used to stay in the milder regions are now spilling down into the driest spots of the Middle East. In those lands where even an inch of water is as rare as gold, people have seen hail pour down like icy marbles, snow blanketing the Judean desert in white, and flash floods rushing through at tens of miles an hour, wiping away every trace of human footprints. For many folks, it's just climate change, rising temps, shifting poles, wild weather patterns gone haywire. But for those with faith, these feel like the first knocks on the door of the end times. Maybe you felt something off in the air too. Winters that don't feel like winters anymore. Storms showing up out of season. Or heat waves that drag on way too long. It all seems like the earth is trying to tell us something. And when you look through the lens of the Bible, those events take on a whole new shape. Not just natural glitches, but warnings written thousands of years ago, like when the Bible says in Luke 21:26 that the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And in today's video, I'm going to walk you through 7 strange weather events in the Middle East, all documented for real in 2024, 2025. We'll go step by step from the background to how they line up with Bible verses to see if this is just coincidence or pieces of a bigger plan. And when these climate signs meet up with geopolitical shifts, especially Middle East conflicts and global ice melt, the big question left for each of us is this: is our time running short and we just haven't noticed? So, are you ready to dive into each one? Let's start with 1. Hail in Jerusalem. Tears from the sky. On the night of May 4th, 2025, Jerusalem, a place that's usually bone dry and scorching hot, suddenly went quiet, like it was holding its breath. Way up in the sky, a strange cold front rolled in, and then hail started falling. Little round ice balls, maybe half an inch to 3/4 of an inch across, shining like teardrops, came down on ground that's used to temps over 100 degrees. Folks just stood there staring, like heaven had reached down and touched the desert. Can you imagine it? If you'd been standing right there in Jerusalem that moment, wouldn't it have given you chills? Jerusalem sits about 2,575 feet above sea level. Normally, it only gets 20 to 24 inches of rain a year, and almost all of that comes in winter. But 2025 has been a wild year weather-wise, like somebody flipped the whole chessboard upside down. Strong winds, moisture blowing in from the Mediterranean, and some weird cold air all crashed together overhead and cooked up a rare little storm. The hail hit around the Dimona area, a desert town about 60 miles away, and left people speechless. Nobody had ever seen anything like it in the middle of spring. After the sun dropped behind the Judean hills and the sky started fading, everything went dark real fast, like someone pulled a curtain. In just a couple minutes, those white ice stones started pouring down, hitting the baked hard ground with a steady plink, plink, plink. A guy named Matanel Rahamim, who lives in the Jerusalem suburbs, caught it on video. You can see the little hailstones rolling across his patio, catching the moonlight and sparkling silver. The whole neighborhood ran outside. Kids were laughing their heads off, grown-ups holding out their hands to catch the ice-cold pieces. Somebody yelled, "It's like God is crying!" But in the middle of all that wonder, the Bible echoes something a little heavier, a warning. Exodus chapter 9, verses 18 and 19 says, "Tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to fall. Now send and gather your livestock and everything you have in the field. For the hail shall come down on every man and animal that is in the field and is not brought home, and they shall die." Those words feel like a reminder. Hail isn't always just weather. Sometimes it's judgment. Then there's the fierce picture in Revelation 16:21. "And great hailstones, heavy as 100 pounds, dropped from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because that plague was so terrible." Or the warning back in Exodus 10:5 about disasters so thick, the ground itself can't even be seen. All 3 passages hit the same serious note. When nature goes crazy, it's never just random. Some folks say, it's just climate change. Sure, science can explain how it happened, but why did it zero in on the one patch of earth right at the heart of Bible prophecy? Psalm 148:8 spells it out plain: fire and hail, snow and mist, stormy wind, fulfilling His word. Nature doesn't throw tantrums on its own. It answers to someone. So that hailstorm over Jerusalem on the night of May 4th, 2025, wasn't some fluke. It was a sign. A gentle but sharp wake-up call that time is moving faster than we think, that the Earth's weather patterns are flipping, and the things the Bible said would happen are starting to show up. This won't be the last hail we see. It's only the first warning. 2. A sudden downpour in the middle of Jerusalem Day. Right in the middle of all the excitement on Jerusalem Day, with blue and white flags waving everywhere and songs echoing off those ancient stone walls that are thousands of years old, the sky suddenly turned dark. The big crowd was heading toward Damascus Gate when a strange cold wind blew through, the kind you just don't feel in the hot, dry May weather around here. A few seconds later, you heard that plop-plop sound, and big fat raindrops started falling, like someone upstairs just turned on the faucet right over the parade. Jerusalem almost never gets heavy rain this time of year. The whole year only brings about 22 inches, and most of that comes in winter. But this weird rain hit exactly when the march was going on, right when the country's heart was beating the loudest. The strangest part? Not one weather forecast saw it coming. No radar blip, no alert. Nothing. The sky just changed its mood in a flash and poured down a washing nobody was ready for. Picture this. You're marching along, happy in 75-degree sunshine, and all of a sudden, the sky flips to cleanse mode. Gives you chills, doesn't it? That rain dumped almost an inch in just half an hour, enough to turn the old cobblestone streets into rushing little rivers that washed away centuries of dust. Some folks ran for cover, but plenty just stood there, arms out, letting the water run down their faces and soak their clothes, like they were being cleaned of some heavy burden they couldn't even name. A few even dropped to their knees in the square, eyes closed, whispering prayers. It didn't look like ordinary rain. It felt like a holy ceremony nobody had put on the schedule. In the Bible, rain always means two things: blessing and warning. Ezekiel 34:26 says, "I will send down showers in season. There will be showers of blessing." This one sure felt in season, like a reminder that a hand up above is still in charge. Then James 5:17-18 tells how Elijah prayed and the rain stopped, then prayed again and it came back, God using weather to wake His people up. And in Revelation 11:6, the two witnesses have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague. When the Bible keeps saying rain is a sign, we can't just shrug and call it coincidence. A lot of folks roll their eyes and say, it's just weather. Okay, but if it's just weather, why did it pour the exact moment the parade passed all those Bible landmarks? Why were people crying? Not because they were annoyed, but because they felt washed clean. Science can explain how clouds work, but it can't explain the why behind the timing. Same as the manna back in the desert. It fell. Everyone saw it. Nobody could tell you why it showed up that particular morning. This kind of thing fits right in with the wild weather swings we're seeing. Hot and cold air streams getting flipped around by shifting magnetic poles, throwing patterns off all over the world. But deeper than any science, it felt like a gentle, sharp nudge from the Lord. Wake up. Pay attention. That rain didn't come to ruin the party. It came to rinse hearts clean before the really big floods of the last days roll in. 3. Snow falls and blankets the Negev desert. Snow on the Negev desert. Just saying that out loud is enough to make anybody raise an eyebrow. A place full of hot sand, sun-baked rocks, and wind so dry it cracks your skin, and now it's wearing a thin white coat like a whisper of winter. If you ever thought snow only belongs on high mountains or in colder countries, this sight would sure make you rethink how you picture the world. The Negev desert stretches over 4,700 square miles and gets maybe 4 inches of rain a year, hardly enough to ever see real snow. But during a few strange nights in 2024 and 2025, a big blast of cold air rolled down from Europe, tangled with the hot Middle East air, and gave us one of the rarest moments anyone can remember. The Jerusalem Post wrote about snow there back in 2015, but this time it happened at lower elevations, which makes it feel even more unlikely by normal weather rules. You're probably wondering the same thing. Why the Negev? And why right now? Under a pale moon, the first flakes drifted down quiet as a prayer. They laid a half-inch of white over the sand and stones, just enough to turn the whole desert into something that looked like it stepped out of an old fairy tale. A local woman, wrapped up in a thick scarf, stood on a low hill, breathed in air that was 32 degrees, scooped up a handful of snow, and tossed it into the sky. Her laugh echoed through the night, mixing with the wind, making a moment that felt fragile and holy all at once. The flakes settled on her shoulders like a short, gentle blessing from above. By morning, the snow was already melting away, leaving little puddles in the cracks of the sand. But those puddles did something years of rain never managed. They woke up tiny green shoots in the dry ground. It was almost as if snow, the purest kind of water, picked the most lifeless place on purpose to bring a little life. If you'd been standing there watching the sun sparkle on the melting drops, you'd have felt something bigger than just weather. In the Bible, snow always means cleansing and judgment. Isaiah 1:18 says, "Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." And in Job 37:6, the Lord tells the snow, "Fall on the earth." Maybe the strongest picture is Revelation 1:14. His head and hair were white like snow. It's no accident that snow, the perfect sign of purity, showed up in the land of promise. Some folks will shrug and say it's just a cold snap, nothing more. Sure, the Mojave gets snow sometimes too, but the Negev isn't just any desert. It's tied to covenants, to the journey of God's people, to promises from the Lord Himself. As the Earth's poles keep shifting and weather turns upside down in ways we can't predict, God is using nature to whisper, "Get ready." That white blanket on the Negev didn't just make the land pretty for a night. It's a reminder that He still wants to make our hearts white as snow before the day of judgment comes. 4. Flash floods in the Judean desert. Some days, nature just decides to wake up a whole stretch of land that's been asleep for way too long. Folks in the Judean desert are used to nothing but dry, cracked canyons and ground hard as baked brick. Then one short rainstorm rolls through, and the whole desert changes color. Anybody who sees it feels like they just stepped into one of those old Bible stories they've heard about forever. The Judean desert sits right on the edge of the Dead Sea, the lowest spot on earth, where you're lucky to get 4 inches of rain in a whole year. It's quiet, dead-looking, and so dry a single blade of grass feels like a miracle. But let a dark cloud dump rain for a few minutes, and everything flips on like a light switch. According to the Times of Israel, flash floods here usually come after quick, heavy downpours, like the recent Storm Byron that had rescue teams scrambling. It's a reminder that desertification is pushing the weather into crazy, unpredictable territory. The second the rain stops, water comes roaring down the steep cliffs like somebody just opened a giant gate up in the sky. You get a flood maybe 10 feet wide and 3 feet deep, thick and milky brown from centuries of dust and sand getting swept along. It tears through the narrow canyons with a roar that bounces off the rock walls like thunder. People stand back and watch, half scared, half amazed, as dead land suddenly turns into a living river, and a rainbow shows up the moment the sun cuts through the leftover mist. In the Bible, floodwaters aren't just weather. They're a sign of judgment and a wake-up call. Genesis 7:11 says, "The fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened." And that sure sounds like those Judean canyons letting loose after months of nothing. But floods aren't only about warning. Joel 2:23 talks about the Lord giving the early rain in righteousness. a reminder that water can bring blessing to the land if people turn their hearts back. Then when you read Revelation 16:1 about the 7 bowls of wrath being poured out on the earth, you can't help wondering, is this just climate, or is something bigger starting to unfold? Of course, a few folks say flash floods in a desert are perfectly normal, just the way the land and sudden rain work. But plenty of people who live there say the speed and power of these latest floods are way beyond normal, tossing 100-pound boulders around like toys. It brings to mind the wild waters in Exodus, things science can describe but can't quite explain the full meaning of. If the Earth's magnetic poles are shifting and the global climate is out of whack, no wonder the floods in the Judean desert are fiercer than ever. From a faith point of view, though, it feels like a loud wake-up call. That water isn't just moving dirt and rocks, it wants to wash away our indifference too. It's a reminder that maybe it's time for our spirits to get cleaned out before that great and terrible day the prophets talked about finally shows up at the door. 5. Lightning strikes down on the Negev sand dunes. Have you ever stood out in nature and felt so tiny, like something way bigger than us is going on? That's exactly what a lot of folks in the Negev said they felt after that wild lightning storm the other night. And honestly, once you see the videos they shot, your heart's gonna skip a beat too, scared and amazed at the same time. The Negev desert is usually bone dry. Lightning hardly ever shows up here. The air's too dry, the sand doesn't carry electricity well, and most nights, it's just dead quiet. But during recent storms, like Storm Byron, people watched hundreds of lightning bolts hammer down onto those golden dunes, one after another. According to Ynet, moist air rushed in from the Mediterranean, charged everything up, and created something meteorologists say is super rare for this desert. That night, the sky got ripped open with long streaks of light, like someone took a giant sword and slashed the darkness. Bolts stretched about 5 miles, glowing blue and red, slamming straight into the dry sand and turning it into twisted glass tubes called fulgurites. The air smelled sharp with ozone, and every crash boomed so loud the ground shook a little. Folks stood on the hills, phones shaking in their hands, hearts pounding, staring at something beautiful and terrifying all at once. In the Bible, lightning is never just weather. It's usually a wake-up call, a show of power, or a reminder that heaven's moving according to a bigger plan. Exodus 9:23 tells how Moses raised his staff and the Lord sent thunder, hail, and fire down on Egypt. Sounds a lot like what hit the Negev. Joel 2:30 talks about wonders in the heavens, fire, and pillars of smoke, which sure looks like those red-hot bolts. And in Revelation 8-5, when the angel pours out fire on the earth, the Bible says there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake, pretty much the exact combo we're seeing now. Some folks shrug and say it's just static electricity, plain old physics. Sure, science can explain how lightning works, but the real question is, why is it suddenly pounding one of the most spiritually important patches of land on Earth, and why so often? Why does it line up with extreme weather hitting other holy places at the same time? From a faith point of view, maybe those streaks tearing across the sky carry another message. Sometimes fear is exactly what we need to bring us back to humility and repentance. And who knows, maybe every bolt that hits those dunes is a gentle but urgent voice saying, "Wake up before it's too late." 6. The big wind and rainstorm in the northern Negev. Just last week, the sky over the northern Negev turned on a dime in a way nobody was ready for. No warning, no easing in. One minute everything was normal, the next the wind was howling, clouds rolled in thick, and nature flipped a switch, like somebody changed the channel way too fast for folks to figure out what was happening. The northern Negev is usually so dry that people are more used to seeing cracked ground than puddles. But Storm Byron came barreling through like an uninvited guest, bringing gusts around 50 miles an hour and up to 4 inches of rain. Real heavy stuff, for a place that treats every raindrop like a rare present. According to Israel Hayom, some spots had minor flooding. Trees got whipped around pretty good, and folks were running for cover while laughing their heads off because they couldn't believe their eyes. In the middle of all that chaos, the wind screamed through the acacia bushes, tossing leaves everywhere like it was flipping through an old desert scrapbook. Rain hammered down on the bone-dry ground, kicking up dust that turned into a light brown haze around the little houses. One local guy stood right out in it, filming with his phone, rainwater streaming down his face, grinning ear to ear, the kind of smile you get when you've waited your whole life to see the desert come alive. The Bible talks about storms that aren't just weather, they're wake-up calls. Joel 1:15 says, "Alas for the day of the Lord is near, and it will come as destruction from the Almighty." That's exactly how this storm felt in the northern Negev. Sudden, fierce, like the sky itself was shaking from the inside. Matthew 24:7 warns that in the last days there'll be famines and earthquakes in various places, signs of a world that's out of whack. And 2 Peter 3:10 says the day of the Lord will come like a thief, with the heavens passing away with a roar and everything laid bare. Those howling desert winds sure sounded a lot like that. Some skeptics say it was just a regular local storm, plain old weather patterns, nothing to see here. But winds that strong are unusual, rainfall way above the yearly average, and the timing lining up with other weird weather across the Middle East. It makes you wonder, is this really random? Or part of something bigger? Science can explain nature just fine, but when rare events keep piling up one after another, it's hard to call it all coincidence. This storm in the northern Negev feels like a big underline on the map of extreme weather the whole world's watching these days. If Earth's magnetic poles really are shifting and the global climate's going haywire, we'll probably see a lot more storms like this. But from a faith point of view, they're also a loud reminder. When wind and rain suddenly rip through a place that's usually dead quiet, maybe that's the moment to stop, look up, and listen to what the Creator might be saying through the gusts blowing all night long. 7. Rare rain causes flooding in Ilam province, Iran. Have you ever seen folks wait so long for rain that the moment the first drops fall, they cheer out loud like little kids? That's exactly what happened this week in Ilam province. Simple, real, and beautiful in a way that's hard to put into words. After months of cracked, thirsty ground, the sky finally opened up with what felt like a blessing, and then, in no time, it turned into total chaos nobody saw coming. Some people said, "This rain came to save us from the drought." Others just shook their heads and said, "Save us? My parking lot's underwater." Can you feel that mix of feelings all at once? Happy, scared, thankful, and worried? That's what thousands of people here went through when the water suddenly rose, poured into underground parking garages, swept away cars and trash, and left behind a sight that made everybody catch their breath. The really strange part isn't just that it rained, it's when it happened. Iran has lost about 85% of its normal rainfall. That's what Reuters reported. So a downpour like this felt almost impossible. Something people had been praying for and never thought would come. So when the clouds finally let go, folks ran outside to feel the drops, like it was a miracle touching the dry earth. But the miracle didn't last long. In just a few minutes, the rain got heavier and turned into a real gully washer. Water rushed into the underground lots and carried everything in its path. People were running every which way, laughing because rain finally came, yelling because their cars were floating off. Half blessing, half disaster. And that mix leaves a big question hanging in the air. Why did the rain come right now? Now, some folks say this has nothing to do with the Bible. It's just weather acting up. Fair enough. But if you step back and ask a bigger question, why, in the middle of the worst drought, did this one area get rain while everywhere else stays cracked and dry? Well, it's hard not to remember the verse that says, "I will send rain on one city, and on another city I will not send rain." The timing, the strength, and the whole situation make this storm feel like more than just regular weather. Whether we explain it with science or with faith, one thing's clear. These sudden, wild swings in the weather are happening more often, getting stronger, and getting harder to ignore. The rain in Elam wasn't just water. It was a reminder, a warning, or maybe a call, however you want to look at it. One thing's for sure. It wasn't some random shower that just happened to fall on a piece of land the sky had forgotten for months. So there you have it. 7 strange weather events in dry, desert places. Which one stuck with you the most? The world these days feels like it's moving to a strange new beat. Faster, messier. Like the ground under our feet is shifting a little more every single day. Up at the North Pole, ice that's been there for thousands of years is melting away at about 13% every 10 years, according to NASA. It's leaving long cracks that look like cuts in the Earth's last suit of armor. And when all that water pours into the oceans, it doesn't just raise the sea level a few inches, it shakes things up in places thousands of miles away, even in the Middle East, where war's already burning hot. You see, that works, isn't it? A chunk of ice breaking off way up in the Arctic can somehow make the deserts over in the Middle East hotter and drier, push people to leave their homes, and crank up the fighting. But that's exactly what's happening. And it's happening so fast, a lot of folks haven't even figured out why the air around them feels different lately. You ever get that feeling too? Like everything's speeding up? Like some unseen hand is nudging the whole world towards something big? In Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and all along those restless borders, running out of water, running out of good land, running out of peace, it's turning into the spark that lights one fire after another. People are on the move because the weather's turned mean, and places that were already hanging by a thread are starting to snap. Long droughts crack the fields wide open, dust storms and flash floods show up where they never did before. It's almost like the planet is having some kind of invisible pole shift, something deep inside making nature and politics wobble at the same time. It gets even stranger. Snow falling where snow never fell, cold snapping at the desert, torrential rain dumping on bone-dry places so hard folks can't believe their eyes. Some call it climate change. Others say it's just nature's cycles. But a few of us are starting to wonder if these are the very signs we were told about long ago, right there in God's Word. The Bible talked plainly about times when the heavens and the earth would shake together with wars and trouble. In Daniel 12:1 it says, "At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will stand up. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then." When you look at the map of fighting in the Middle East today, the explosions, the attacks, the endless streams of people leaving, you have to ask, could this be that time of distress? In Revelation 16:12, it says, "The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east." Sound familiar? With the ice melting, the Euphrates, already in bad shape, is drying up even more. That's not just a water problem. It changes the whole chessboard over there. No water means no crops, no people staying put, no peace. Everything slides toward chaos. Ezekiel talks about the earth and people both trembling as a final sign. In Ezekiel 38:19-20, it says, "In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence." When we see earthquakes hitting here and there, sudden blizzards covering the Saudi desert, floods swallowing places that used to be dry as brick, you've got to wonder, is the ground shaking, or is the Lord trying to get our attention? I'll be honest, the more I watch what's going on, the more it feels like time itself is getting squeezed. Things that should take centuries are happening in a few years, sometimes a few months. You feel it too, don't you? Like the clock's running fast, and every event carries a weight we can't brush off. If the Bible teaches us anything, it's that signs always come before the next chapter starts. Snow in the desert, ice caps melting, rivers drying, seas rising, war after war, they're not random. They line up like pieces of a picture that was prophesied thousands of years ago. And right now, that picture is coming into focus faster than the world knows what to do with. Some folks will say, it's just science. Others say, it's just what people have done to the planet. But some of us, maybe you too, feel something bigger, holier, stronger moving underneath it all. Something that's not only about nature, but about heaven, where the shaking down here is just an echo of bigger things happening in God's great plan. And if these really are the signs, then the question isn't when anymore. It's where are we in the story? The world is shifting poles, and every change feels like a bell ringing from heaven, urgent yet majestic, calling us to look up, take stock, and get our hearts ready for the new age that's rolling in. Looking back at these 7 things happening all over the world, from the ice melting at the North Pole, snow falling in the middle of the desert, to rare rains turning into flash floods after long droughts, we can't just call them random or separate events. They're connected, like urgent notes in a final symphony, where the earth itself seems to be shaking and saying, wake up before it's too late. Every shift in the weather, every war that breaks out, it all feels like it's drawing a straight line toward the very time the Bible warned us about thousands of years ago. The earth is shifting poles, not just physically, but spiritually too. Everything that used to feel solid is turned upside down. Nations are shaking. Every single person feels some heavy, unseen weight on their soul. And it's not an accident. It's the Lord calling out to a world that's forgotten Him for far too long. It's like He's waking us up through storms, earthquakes, and strange things that science can explain but can't deny feel perfectly timed. In the middle of all this, the warning couldn't be clearer. Turn back to God. Pray. Live the way He asks us to. This isn't meant to scare anybody. It's a loving wake-up call, a light on the path for folks walking through these dark and crazy days. When the world shakes, only faith can keep our hearts steady. When everything else falls apart, only the Lord is the rock that never moves. Don't brush this off. Don't treat it like just another news story or normal weather. These signs are like the final alarm clock before Jesus comes back, and He wants you awake, not terrified, but ready, with a heart that's turned back to Him. You still have time, but nobody knows how much. The clock is ticking louder, and every day brings us closer to the biggest moment in human history. So I'm asking you to stop for just a second. Look inside yourself. Ask, if today was my last day, how would I stand before God? If you feel the need to pray, go ahead and pray right now. If something's on your heart, a thought, a feeling, a prayer for our country, your family, or the whole world, please write it in the comments below. Your words might be the very encouragement someone desperate needs right now. And if you believe this message needs to get out to more people, help me spread it. Hit like, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel so more folks can wake up, be reminded, and find their way back to Him. Even the smallest action from you can touch a soul that's searching. We don't have a lot of time left, but if we stand together and stay awake together, none of us will walk alone through these last days.
All right, for the future of everything, now to what might be the most consequential news of the week.
The woman says she was enjoying the pool Wednesday night when she saw a strangely shaped and
So the night sky has gotten interesting because we're sending a lot more up there. So there are
The world is changing color, and the sky above us doesn't feel quiet anymore. Strange signs are showing up more and more, from perfect purple rings hanging in the sky over Japan, to glowing figures in the dark, to black portals opening right in the air above The Hague. They're all coming together like pieces of a puzzle that's both breathtakingly beautiful and downright scary. If you pay attention, you feel it. Time seems to be running out, hour by hour. Do you feel it too? these things aren't happening all by themselves. A lone figure standing calm in the middle of wildfires in Chile. An invisible force yanking people away with nobody seeing who or what touched them. A strange hand sign during a public ceremony that hints at hidden power. And finally, those glitches in reality. Shadows that won't go away, like the world is starting to show its real face. 7 signs. 7 warnings. 7 pieces that fit perfectly with what Jesus talked about in Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation. The Bible said that before the last day, the sun, the moon, and the stars would give strange signs. Well, those signs aren't just stories in an old book anymore. They're happening right in front of us. And every one of them feels like it's telling us to stop, look up, and ask ourselves, are we ready? What do you think? Maybe it's time the world gave an honest answer. Because whether we like it or not, humanity's time is getting short. These signs aren't here just to scare us. They're here to wake us up, to call us, to remind us to turn back to God before the final door closes. And if you're watching this video right now, it's not by accident. It's a message from the Lord, calling the people He's chosen to hold on tight to their faith and to reach out while there's still time. So please don't ignore any of His signs. Come with me, and let's look closer at these 7 events. 7 warnings from God that tell us our time is almost up. 1. Strange purple orbs in the night sky. A young woman in Japan just stepped out onto her balcony for some fresh air that night. What she saw over the neighborhood made her heart skip a beat. A perfect circle of purple light, flawlessly round, not off by a single degree, was hanging in the air like someone drew it with an invisible hand. It blinked on and off, came sliding out of the dark gray clouds, moved incredibly fast, and didn't make a sound. It stayed there a long time, bright enough to light up the whole night like a giant eye watching mankind. People on the street stopped dead in their tracks. Some whispered how beautiful it was. Others got scared and wanted to run back inside. What about you? If you saw it, what would you do? This happened in a quiet, ordinary neighborhood in Japan, the kind of place where nothing spooky ever happens. No satellites were passing over, no planes, no light source that could reflect into a perfect circle like that. Even the light experts couldn't explain how it just hung there without fading away. Some folks said it was a drone, but drones shake, they move around, they make noise. This purple ring was completely silent, like the shadow of heaven touching the earth. Plenty of neighbors whispered, "Angels." Sounds over the top, I know, but nobody could deny something supernatural was in the air that night. When we open the Bible, we see warnings just like this, written thousands of years ago. Luke 21 talks about great signs from heaven, and signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and says people will be terrified and confused. This isn't just some old story. It feels like it's coming alive over those Japanese rooftops. Then in Acts chapter 2, the Lord says, "I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below." See, the Bible doesn't say maybe. It says, I will. These lights don't show up just to entertain us. They come as reminders. And in Revelation 15, John wrote, "I saw another great and marvelous sign in heaven." Those words sound exactly like that purple circle. Great, marvelous, straight from the sky. Gives you chills how it lines up, doesn't it? Some skeptics say it was just an optical illusion. But illusions don't make a perfect circle. Illusions don't stay rock still in the sky for 10 minutes without fading. And they sure don't show up on dozens of phones and cameras from different angles at the exact same moment. Drone? Nobody's built a drone that's silent, motionless, and glows purple. Every normal explanation hits a brick wall. Only the Bible still offers an answer that fits. God uses signs in the sky to wake people up. So what was that circle of light? A signal, a warning at a time when the world is racing toward the edge. Do you really think it's all just coincidence? Or could the Lord be shaking us awake, telling us to get ready before the final door closes? Signs in the heavens never show up just to look pretty. They come to tell us the day of the Lord's return is closer than we think. Are you looking up and seeing it? 2. A glowing white orb, magical, in a pitch-black forest, a shining figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the night. Not a street light, not a phone flash, not any kind of man-made light at all. It looked like something with a real shape